Drive isn't that good. Before you start finger blasting your keyboard to berate me for the uncultured swine I am, slide down your little Ryan Gosling love goggles and hear me out. I'm going to show you two scenes from two very different revenge films, one quite popular, the other one not so much. First, a scene from a movie you've probably all seen and think highly of, Nicholas Winding Refn's 2011 film Drive. Now I'll admit this scene is beautifully framed and lit. When he pulls her back and the light dims perfectly, my no-no area gets perked up. But what this scene is missing is emotion, and I know a lot of you guys are going to start commenting, no, it's all about the subtlety of the performance. You're missing the whole point. You're a fucking nerd. No one likes you. Well, to me, there's nothing interesting about an emotionless sociopath as a main character in the context of this story. The driver obviously cares for Irene to some extent, and we're obviously supposed to root for him on his journey to get out from under the thumb of his previous life. But I can't for the life of me relate to this character, which in turn means I can't care about the character. He's the literal embodiment of style over substance.
And beyond that, this film is meant to be some hyper-violent tale, and while there's some great shots of gore in this film, they don't really hit me as viscerally as they should. Most of the best fight scenes end in lingering shots of the driver's face, seemingly meant to convey some emotion from Gosling, but what we're left with is this vacant-ass stare. I kid you not, this reaction shot is 50 seconds long, and I went ahead and sped it up for you. When you utilize gore as shock value, there either needs to be a reaction within the film to let us know what happened here is not okay in this world, or set us up to care about the character being mutilated or doing the mutilating. But all we're left with is this cool looking scene. Let's take a look at the 2018 S. Craig Zahler film Dragged Across Concrete as an example. We're introduced to Jennifer Carpenter's character, who's a new mother terrified to go back into work and leave her baby after her maternity leave. The story spends a ton of time teaching us who she is to the point where we honestly think she might be a new main character. All this to instantly kill her once she gets to work, and in brutal fashion, might I add.
Will you make sure my baby gets his name is Jackson?
Zahler earned that gore shot, and it kicked like a mule because we knew this woman. Now let's compare it to my favorite revenge film of all time, Jeremy Saulnier's 2013 film Blue Ruin.
No violence is hidden out of frame. They perfectly choreographed a fight between a man with zero combat experience taking his first life against a man much larger than him. Both the build-up where he regrets his actions before he even commits them, the emotional impact of taking a life shown by the actor is on a completely different level compared to what's shown in Drive, showing the struggle both physically and emotionally to secure his first kill. Everything is right on screen for us to see and gives us a reason to feel something. And before you come at me, I understand these two characters are very different. Gosling's character is meant to carry an icy demeanor and he's lived through this dark past of violence, and Dwight's character is more of an everyman who's been broken by the loss of his family. And I don't know about you, but the emotionless protagonist for the type of story being told here comes off as lazy writing, with more focus on making a film a 13-year-old boy would think is sick, as opposed to a much more powerful tale about a good-natured man trying to break free of his dark past. What we're left with is an emotionally stilted performance by Gosling, and while it's spot on for Refn's vision, when it's lumped in alongside the stereotypical and formulaic villains who seemingly only exist to push the plot forward without any motivations of their own, it leaves us a middling movie with a masterful soundtrack, like genuinely one of the best of all time. Now what if I told you one of these films had a budget of $16 million and the other one was made with $400,000? Let's talk about how it accomplishes this. Now both of these films are revenge thrillers where the protagonist isn't much of a talker, however one of them carries 10 times the emotional impact, as good if not better practical effects, superior direction and performances, yet it achieves this with 2.5% the budget. And before you start slamming at your keyboards telling me, but VHSGuy, one of these movies has car chases in it, so of course it costs more money. Let's take a look at these car chases that cost a lot of money. 90% of this is close-up shots of Ryan Gosling's face. They could have shot this shit with $15 and a GoPro. Either way, let's look beyond set design and special effects for a moment. First, I just want to point out that Ryan Gosling took home $1.5 million for his performance in Drive, which is incredible considering he only spoke 116 lines in this movie, which equals out to 891 words. factoring out to $1,700 a word. Alongside him we have Bryan Cranston, who recently blew up due to Breaking Bad, and Ron Perlman not too far after Hellboy 2, so they likely had similar price tags. So let's be modest and say just to hire these 3 actors, they shelled out $4 million. Well, that's already 10 times the amount required to film the entirety of Blue Ruin, which I'd argue to hell and back is superior in every facet to Drive. Blue Ruin carries twice the emotional weight in very similar scenes with an absolute no-name actor at the time, and arguably to this day, Macon Blair is still not a household name, though he directed the new Toxic Avenger movie and I'm really excited to go see it. He was brought on because 1, he's very good friends with Saulnier and wasn't expensive to bring on board.
I knew like I had to enlist my best friend and one of the most talented actors that I've ever seen.
2, he's a talented actor with something to prove, which includes doing damn near anything to make a name for himself. And while I love Ryan Gosling, was he worth the price tag? Well, the answer is probably. As much as I'm shitting on Drive right now, it's a good film and it pulled in $81 million at the box office, well in profit on its budget. Would it have achieved these numbers with a no-name as the lead? Let's face it, no. However, is it a better movie than Blue Ruin? Fuck no. Did it need a $16 million budget? Also, fuck no. If you're familiar with Nicholas Winding Refn's work, he actually gave Mads Mikkelsen his breakout role in the Pusher series, which is excellent and lacking many of the flaws I'm mentioning for Drive. This film was also made in a pretty tight budget of $850,000, so we know he's capable of working within a budget as well. It's honestly surprising the shortcuts you notice a director take when they're given a big pile of cash and told to run with it, often resulting in a lesser film. There are obvious exceptions to this, but you see it all too often. A director with an amazing start to their career begins making middling studio pictures. It almost feels like with the large budgets being provided to them, they no longer feel the need to prove themselves. With low budgets and limitations, they have to do the best they can with what they have, which often leads to more experimentation and a more grounded approach, knowing they can't just blow up a city block, and instead they blow up our hearts with emotional scenes and relatable characters. For example, just small things in Blue Ruin, like Macon Blair actually throwing up in this scene. He could have just off-screened it, he didn't need to actually throw up there. But he didn't. He knew it would look great on screen, garner more sympathy for Dwight, and people like me would notice. It often seems the comfortability of knowing you have the funds to make the movie you want leads to a safe and average film. We see this again with Refn's follow-up film, Only God Forgives, also starring Ryan Gosling, and that movie's a fucking mess. With as much shit as I've talked about Refn, I would like to say I do think he's a talented director, but I don't think he's truly challenged himself creatively in a while, which I hope future directors take note of. Just because you've made it doesn't mean the passion needs to dry up. Look at the Scorseses and Tarantinos of the world. Some of their films are better than others, but they've never really dropped a stinker regardless of how massive their budget is compared to their early work. Hell, look at Star Wars. These early films were shot on a very minimal budget considering the scope of these films, and through those limitations they pulled off something absolutely groundbreaking. And I say this as a prequel enjoyer, but George no longer had these limitations on the future films, and the final product suffered. Most roles helmed a big name actor, CGI was thrown at every obstacle, and the result was stilted performances in a film that was pretty ugly relative to the originals. I do hope Refn can return to his former glory because I think he's a talented guy. I do see it credited that he'll be helming a remake of Maniac Cop written by Ed Brubaker, who's written some pretty solid comic runs, which is honestly incredibly exciting as a fan of the original films. And before I end, I'd be remiss if I didn't further shill Blue Ruin, because this film is honestly just amazing and doesn't get the recognition it deserves. Jeremy Saulnier can stretch a budget like no other, his other films, Murder Party and Green Room, are also excellent, and I'm excited to see his future projects. And that's the end, guys. I know you guys might not agree with me, but I appreciate you making it to the end, and please subscribe, and bye.
When I feel that touch of a man, it gets me excited.